This is Bill Scher on the Liberal Oasis radio show. Hope you have a good weekend plan. Hope you are dealing with the economic roller coaster okay. Even though the Senate conservatives, in their obstructionist, cowardly glory, have tried to drown not just the auto industry, but the economy itself. At this taping on Friday midday, it does seem like in one of his final acts, President Bush will not do something completely stupid and disastrous, might leave on a halfway decent note and actually open up the so-called TARP fund that has been used for the financial industry bailout, and take a small piece of that to make sure that the auto industry does not collapse on his way out the door. This is following, as you may know, there was a bill that passed the House that was going to tide the auto industry over, prevent 1 million, if not 2 million jobs from being wiped off of the economy. This is after we've already lost nearly 2 million jobs this year in this year-long recession so far. House passed that bill, had White House support. Democrats made a whole bunch of concessions to the White House to get this bill passed. But the Senate conservatives, who seem primarily interested in factlessly bashing unions, and even though they only had minority support, only 35 of them voted against the bill, but you needed 60 votes to stop a filibuster. You need a supermajority, and Democrats were a few votes short of that. So they successfully blocked the bill. There was fears that serious economic panic would ensue that might have a massive market fall off on Friday, but at this taping it seems like that's not going to happen because the White House said, okay, even though we said we wouldn't do this before, we will look at giving a temporary loan to the auto companies with the TARP funds. So we may avert enormous economic disaster this weekend. But this whole episode is a reminder that just because we won an election doesn't mean that you don't have to make your arguments, win in the court of public opinion. There has been a relentless campaign to scapegoat unions and assembly line workers in this whole debate. And it has done a number. Public opinion is, depending on the poll, split or leaning against having this auto rescue plan, even though when we had, this whole process has gone in some ways a lot better than the financial bailout. At least these auto industry executives had to show up, actually had to go to Congress, actually had to submit to questioning, actually had to offer restructuring plans. And have a deliberative process so this can be done well, not just done backdoor style. But despite all that, there's been such a drubbing in the media on working people in this country that it's been hard to make the broader argument that was made during the congressional testimony. There was one economist, Mark Zandi, who's from Moody's Economy.com. He is not a political activist. He is not paid by the auto industry. He is just an economic, professional economic observer who said, you know what? These auto executives, they're coming in asking for a $34 billion loan. Don't kid yourself. They need more money than that to get over this hump. It's probably going to be upwards of $125 billion. But having said that, if you don't do this, if you let them file for bankruptcy, which is not a sustainable option for auto companies because people won't buy cars from a bankrupt company, it is going to be, quote, cataclysmic. And the cost to everybody is going to be several $100 billion more than it would be if you offered a loan to the auto companies that could eventually be paid back once they get back on their feet. So even though that's the facts of the case, you still had this blame shifting onto unions. You've had multiple news organizations, including the New York Times, who retracted themselves, without admitting their own error. But this notion that the auto workers are making over $70 an hour is total bunk. The GM assembly line workers make $28 an hour, which is not all that different from what the non-union plants in the South that are run by foreign automakers, not all that different from what they make. Yes, the health and pension benefits are more generous with the unionized workforces in the Midwest, but there's a couple things to note here. One, what you see at the $70 an hour number, that's conservatives taking all these benefit costs and wrapping them together and then dividing it amongst the number of workers, which doesn't make sense because, and comparing it to these non-unionized workforces in the South, it doesn't make sense because the northern workers in the Midwest who are unionized have been around much longer. They have many, many, many more retirees. They have more retiree obligations than the folks in the non-unionized southern plants do, number one. Number two, we keep saying Toyota and Honda and Nissan, they do so much better with non-unionized workforces. Well, their plants in Japan and Korea are unionized, and they do quite well. So that's not really the issue here. Thirdly, on the question of pensions, this is the 2006 Wall Street Journal article that talked about the problem with executive pensions. And it said that GM, they have $95 billion in pension obligations to their workers, but that money is in a fund that's set aside and makes money, offsetting the cost. Whereas the executive pensions are not set aside, and those are the pensions that directly drag down the bottom line. And when 2 years ago GM was complaining, our pension costs add $800 to every car, and the Wall Street Journal asked, well, are those your pensions or your worker pensions? GM wouldn't say publicly because they can keep their executive stuff private. So the pension costs aren't really, the worker pension costs are not really the problem here. And when it comes to healthcare, let's not forget we're competing with Toyota and Honda and Nissan, who are based in countries where their governments guarantee health care for all, whereas American auto workers have to shoulder the entire burden themselves. So there's tons of, apples to oranges comparisons going on here that have not been effectively countered because, part of the problem is, the automaker CEOs, are idiots and have made tons of strategic mistakes and did not invest in fuel-efficient cars and kept resisting liberal calls for more government regulation, and they have blamed the workers at times themselves. So they were very poor communicators of this argument, and of course the union representatives themselves barely get on TV to even make their case and defend themselves. All these anti-union arguments get repeated ad nauseum as if they were objective fact. So it's a reminder for all of us, even though we seem to have averted disaster because those in the know. And let me state this for you. I believe these Republican senators knew full well that Bush would come in and save the day. It was said in a CNN article that they were told that ahead of time, and that they knew this was necessary. But they did not want to take the political risk of having to tell their constituents, who have been fed all this anti-union nonsense, that this was necessary. So they could say, hey, you know what, let the lame duck president take the fall. I can demagogue all day long, and I won't have to take the blame myself, even though I know deep down that's actually necessary. So they wouldn't actually communicate the facts to their own constituents and take the responsibility for it. With that in mind, know you're dealing with people on the right who are not intellectually honest, but have some platform still, have the ability to distort the media, give the public wrong information, and manipulate public opinion. If we're going to win these big battles, we got a big one that's right around the horizon. My group, Institute for America's Future, just put out a $900 billion Main Street recovery plan, laying out the public investments that need to be done to get our $15 trillion economy back on track. We got a massive economy. It takes big numbers to move a big economy. We got to do green investment. We got to do infrastructure. We got to do education. We got to do healthcare. We got to have more anti-poverty programs. And we need some middle-class tax cuts to get through this recessionary period. That's all in this plan. The Obama people are talking very similarly about that. but expect a lot of misinformation from the right. Don't assume that you can just get these things done automatically, even though they're necessary. We have to make the case for them.